point.
I guess I have two questions, but one is to sort of maybe ask you to say a little bit more about your choice of open societies as opposed to democratic societies, because I think you've chosen the word deliberately, and I'd be interested in that.
I think democracy is, first of all, it's much abused term. I mean, you had people's democracies and so on. Secondly, democracy is a very treacherous term because it implies the rule of the majority. And if you carry that aspect to its logical conclusion, it leads you to ethnic cleansing. Because all you have to do is you have to exterminate the minority and you have got your majority consolidated. An open society can only survive, if people care about having an open society, if it itself is a social ideal for which people are willing to make sacrifices. And in fact, the sacrifice we ought to have made would have been to help those countries more than we did, because open society is a more sophisticated form of organization. It's so sophisticated that you don't even know it's there.
When I was in Asia, that to talk about openness as a goal was something that people could accept as a sort of general proposition. When you started to talk too much about democracy, you got a reaction, well, you're just trying to impose your system on us. And they think when an American says democracy, it means a president and two houses of Congress and a Bill of Rights and two parties, and then they say, well, we're very different. But if you talk about openness, they'll necessarily agree with it, but it's a much more somehow universal principle.
Right. There is a problem of values in open society and in modern society, be it nationally or ethnically based or religiously based, because there you have a fixed set of values. And I'm arguing that open society is a value. It certainly is to me. But it is, in fact, the value that is guiding my actions, and that is what I am spending my money on. See? But I don't think it is generally. You see, I think what activates people is interest, right? So usually people get active in pursuit of some very specific interest, self-interest of some kind of communal interest. So it can be, let's say, nationalism. You can mobilize. You could mobilize it. People behind class war, because it was done, or behind religion, or behind some within a democratic society. You actually must be at a certain point be willing to be more concerned about the system, the form of social organization, which I call open society, than your particular interest. See, and that's very difficult to get to. The idea that you have to abide by certain legal constraints is just very, very difficult. It's a very abstract thing. And I asked him, what's the difference between you and the mafia? And it was very interesting. He says, I'm clean and they are not. But in actual fact, I'm not sure that there is all that much difference.
The distemper or the moroseness that seems to characterize all Western societies today. I mean, the sense of discontent, which is so deep-seated, and what can be done to try to turn that around? Because a lot of us feel that there's a kind of the balkanization that you see over in Eastern Europe is in a sense mirrored by an increasing divisiveness and a lack of an understanding or a commitment to those things which unite us as a society and a people. I'm sure it has something to do with the values of freedom, open society, democracy. I'm not going to get into a long discussion of semantics. But how do you understand the period that we're in now, which seems to be so unique in terms of the discontent that seems to be so deep-seated among the people, and what might be the way out of this?
I think it's quite severe, and I think that institutions in this country that have really worked for 200 years are no longer working. I'm talking about, for instance, political institutions. And I do think it's a crisis of values. And it has to do with the spread of market economy. Because market, it creates exchange value. You see, you value something for what it can, for the money, the money that what it can get you, right? The exchange value then becomes the dominant value, and as a dominant value, it's just simply not adequate, because there has to be something ultimate that you value. Otherwise, what's the good of money? What's the good of it? So that other people are envious of you. So you do have to have some value other than the exchange value. 100 years ago, you had crafts. People took pride in making shoes or whatever. Or you had doctors until a few years ago who took pride in curing people. There still are doctors who would like to feel that way, but the pressures are to turn being a doctor into a business. You see? And so you measure your success by how much money you make as a doctor. And that leads you to activities which are not really professionally guided. So I think there is this serious, there ought to be a sense of right and wrong as distinct from what works and what doesn't work. And when you look at politics, right, I mean, to be a hard-headed, successful politician, you must get elected. And what matters is, what the public opinion polls say, and how does it play. Okay, you bomb. What did we bomb lately? Iraq. And your rating goes up, and that is what is undermining our political system, because we used to elect representatives for what they stood for, but now they stand for what we elect them for, right? So there is a circularity about it, you see, which is unstable.
As I read you, and have read you, your notion of an open society is that people become very tolerant to an open system which has a lot of ambiguity. Mm-hmm. There aren't answered questions.
I don't think people necessarily become tolerant. It's not a question of being tolerant, but rather a question of putting value on tolerance. I mean, you must recognize the value of diversity, of minorities. It doesn't mean that you actually tolerate them, but you know that you are breaking your own recipe.
If there's one thing that needs to be done by people who believe as you do, that Bosnia is somehow a vital national interest of the United States, it is to articulate what that interest is.
Right.
Because to explain, that there may be a war between the Albanians and the Serbs, exploding over national borders, et cetera, just passes by people's ears. They don't hear it, so what? It's far away and so on.
You see, this is why, and unfortunately, you have to go back to something abstract, which is open society. I mean, it so happens that Sarajevo is a beacon of open society. It is genuinely multi-ethnic. It happens to be largely Muslim, but Muslims were the city dwellers in that part of the world. Instead of that, we have this image, partly fostered by our unwillingness to get engaged, that, well, they are Muslims, therefore they are fundamentalists, therefore they are somehow not. I mean, the prejudice against Muslims in Europe is amazing. I mean, I've been surprised how important a factor it has been in the attitude to Bosnia. So, unfortunately, you see, you have to go quite deep and quite abstract and quite general to realize that our vital interests are involved. And this idea that that we are living in an open society, and if we weren't, we would be much less happy, just hasn't been established. I mean, as I say, people just don't think in those terms.
But you also have to address, I would add to, it's fine to say what's important, but you also have to say what would you do about it, because some things are
Of course.
important and
Yeah.
are just
Now,
the price of...
incidentally, this is particularly true of the defense establishment. I mean, this is, it's hard-headed, we have to be hard-headed, we have to look out for our national interest. That is our dogma. And I think it's a false dogma. You see, I think that you do have to look out for this systemic interest, and if you don't, you end up in like you did in the Second World War. Now, Bosnia doesn't qualify. It simply just doesn't qualify. There is no victory to be had in Bosnia. All you can do in Bosnia, you can interdict the success of this, let's say, ethnic cleansing policy. You can't actually, you don't want to. I mean, you have a limited objective. Bosnia is not a state that you want to necessarily preserve as such. But you don't want the ethnic principle to succeed. And you in fact, you want to punish it. Even if in the end it succeeds, because I don't think you can put Bosnia. I mean, Bosnia is all over. I mean, we are as far as a multi-ethnic society, but still, there ought to be some interdiction of the ethnic principle.
First of all, I want to say I'm grateful to you for coming into a government agency and talking about the importance of society.
Well,
and
you are people too.
We're grateful. We're grateful for the
openness to great
for your openness. And I remembered something that was written when Isaac Bashevis Singer died last year. He was asked once, "Are we free?" And he said, "We must believe we're free. We have no other choice." So thank you for being here. It's very good to have you. Thank you all for being here.
You're from Hungary, born in Hungary, lived there during the Nazi occupation. Take me back to that experience for you, and
well, I mean,
how you survived.
Well, as a young man, I was 14 years old when the Germans came in, and I lived under false names. And if I hadn't done that, I would have been deported, and who knows whether I would have. The chances are that I would not have survived.
And what happened to your family?
We all survived because my father had enough sense to take evasive action.
And did that shape you in any way?
It was a formative experience.
And how did it shape you?
Well, that, and then afterwards the beginning of the communist regime, really taught me how important, what kind of society you live in. I mean, here in America, people take certain things for granted. Sort of democracy is like the air. It's just sort of is there. But if you look at the rest of the world, that is not the case. So it is at that time that I developed my own, say, convictions about what I call an open society. And when I had the means to do something about it, that's what I used my money for.
Was there a moment in which you came to a realization, a kind of midlife crisis?
Yes.
What happened?
Well, that was in 1979 when I reached a certain level.
What's a certain level?
Let's say $100 million.
Right.
Actually, making money in the stock market is actually a very painful process. It's a tremendous tension, and you really make a very deep sacrifice to succeed.
What sacrifice do you make in terms
I mean,
of
it's
it takes its
basically
toll on stress and physical deterioration,
yes,
or what?
No, I mean, it's for me, there was always a large element of pain involved, because when you're wrong, you see, you have to feel that you're wrong, and you have to you have to correct your mistakes. This is one of the characteristics that I have, which is that I'm a survivor.
Yes.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Yes.
And I'm a survivor because I try to avoid those risks. So I like to push to the limit of what is acceptable in terms of risk, but not over the limit.
Yeah. And it always comes down to what's an acceptable limit and how do you determine that? And that's where judgment and experience and wisdom comes in.
Yes, I mean, so far I've survived. So far I've survived.
So in 1979, you have $100 million, and you say, what?
What is it all about? What am I going to do with this money? And then I thought about it, and I decided that really what I care about is this concept of an open society. But the idea of an open society is a universal idea. And certainly Western Europe, United States is a case in point. But you see, open society itself, the concept, has a weakness. It's a lack of conviction, a lack of commitment to the idea of an open society. And without it, it can't survive.
So you decided then, which is fascinating to me, and the story has been told in another number of places, to begin to move around Eastern Europe, giving away money, and making alliances with pro-democratic, pro-open society individuals, investing in human beings.
You see, people there have this sense of values. They know what freedom means. They know what... you don't need to explain to them the concept of an open society. So all I did was to find them and to support them. And basically all the work was done by them.
And with your money and
my support.
About $1 billion, is that a fair?
Well, it's been committed, and I think I must have spent by now. Now we are running sort of in the range of a couple of $100 million.
Any question in your mind it's going to pay off?
It has paid off.
What has brought you the greatest satisfaction in your life?
I think that now the work of the foundation is something that I can really identify with, and it does give me satisfaction that I'm doing something not just for myself.
How do you feel about the enormous power that you have, without quibbling about it, because you know, and you're very careful, that your opinion about interest rates, about markets, about currencies can have a profound impact.
Yes.
How does that shape you?
I feel the way the porcupines feel about lovemaking.
Very careful. That's right. Israel. We talked, Benjamin Netanyahu was here. You would think that someone who survived what you did would have an incredible support for that country and for the notion of what it stands for. But I don't see in your record that.
It is true. It is true.
Why?
I mean, I have, of course, a sympathy because I'm Jewish. But to much of its history, Israel has been very much of a nationalistic country. And had I lived there, I would have been opposed to the policies. I think I would have been opposed to the policies of Likud. He's an expert in Soviet minorities. It really started in 1944 when Hungary was occupied by the Germans. And me being Jewish, I was in danger of life. When the Germans came in, he said, this is a lawless occupation. The normal rules don't apply. You have to forget how you behave in a normal society. This is an abnormal situation. And he arranged for all of us to have false papers. Everybody had a different arrangement. I was adopted by an official of the Minister of Agriculture, whose job was to take over Jewish properties. So I actually went with him, and we took possession of these large estates. That was my identity. So it's a strange, very strange life for it. I was 14 years old at the time.
George, you've written, the Second World War gave me a lesson I've never forgotten. What was the lesson?
The main lesson that I learned during the war is to expect the unexpected. I mean, the situations that you get into are so out of context with what you have grown up with that you have to examine the framework in which you think. And then you realize that we all work with preconceived ideas. And those ideas don't necessarily correspond to reality. So there is this gap between perception and reality. And that's the gap that I have really kind of explored and also exploited. So I came to a conclusion that basically all our views of the world are somehow flawed or distorted. And then I concentrate on the importance of this distortion in shaping events. It really is the method of alchemy, because the value of securities or the value of currencies is much more dependent on the kind of incantations or formulas that you are using. And so you really are dealing with a process of alchemy rather than a process of science. I'm basically interested in manias, or what I call boom-bust sequences. That is to say, processes which are initially self-reinforcing but unsustainable and therefore eventually have to be reversed.
Give me an example. Does a little bell go off in your head when you read the morning paper? How does it work?
Well, it doesn't happen every day, first of all, because these processes occur infrequently, and there are long periods in between when it's sort of, from my point of view, is noise. And that's, sort of just a normal kind of situation. You take, for instance, what I called Reagan's imperial circle, when Reagan embarked in the early 1980s on an aggressive program of rearmament and was unwilling to pay for it, and so it was deficit financing, and you had a self-reinforcing process, of a strong dollar, a strong economy, a strong stock market, which was, however, unsustainable and had eventually to be reversed. So it was a boom-bust kind of sequence. And I think that I understood it reasonably well.
And the same thing would work on the downside in a depression. Is there a Great Depression anywhere in the world today that has to be reversed?
I think that we are in a Great Depression now in the world. I think that we are in conditions very similar to what prevailed in the 1930s.
From this small trading room in New York, Soros trades currency, stocks, and bonds around the world. But looking for the unexpected on a global scale is not an easy job. Soros made one of his biggest mistakes in his own backyard. You wrote that you saw the crash coming in the late 80s, in 87, and yet you got caught like everyone else. How do you explain that?
I made a very big mistake because I expected the crash to come in Japan, and I was prepared for that, and it would have given me an opportunity to prepare for the follow-up in this country, and actually it occurred on Wall Street and not in Japan. So I was wrong.
If someone came to you and said, have your foundation investments, the amount of money that you have through foundation, creating the university, Central European University?
Yes.
Creating the university and other things you have done to promote the notion of an open society, have those seeds been worth the effort?
Yes.
Would you say yes, or would you say...
No question about it. I mean, I think that when you look at the entirety of what the foundations have done, it's been very worthwhile and very effective.
Philanthropy for you is more rewarding than anything you do?
Well, I've got great reservations about philanthropy. Actually, I really think that charity is a very corrupting activity, and it is so, even in my own foundations, and I'm struggling against it all the time.
Where does the corruption come from?
Well, first of all, you corrupt the people that you give money to, because you don't teach them self-reliance, but you teach them to depend on you.
You teach them dependence rather than interdependence.
That's right. So you make them, they become objects of charity,
yes.
Which, I mean, we avoid. But then it's very corrupting to the giver, because people suck up to him. People will tell him people, when they go to a foundation, they tell the foundation what the foundation wants to hear. And then when they get the money, they do with it what they want to do. And the two are not the same.
Does it cause you to want to pull back from philanthropy because you believe that it might not be?
No, but I must say that I got sucked into something that I knew was full of paradoxes and contradictions.
Did you do it in the beginning because you had made so much money that you wanted to carry forward a philosophy you believed in?
Well, it had to do with that.
There has been much talk about your comeback. During the bad times of certainly the beginning of '95, I guess, when did the comeback begin, when you began to once again connect?
Well, no, I don't. No, I think this shouldn't be taken out of context. We have had, several patches. We have an average performance of something like 35%
over the last
20 odd years, 26 years. But it's made up of years which are 5% or 8%, and years that are 60% or 100%. That's how you get the average.
Yeah.
And we had 4 wonderful years, 90 to 93 inclusive, and 94 we were only up 4%, which was our second worst year. And in the first half of this year, we were actually down when the market was up.
That's what I referred to.
And
yeah.
that was a sort of a bad patch.
But you have said, you're quoted as saying that somehow you began to feel somewhat that the forces were against you, in a sense. I mean, did you...
Well, we just didn't get it right. We had the opportunities were there, and we got caught. And it didn't hang together, but we got it together now.
All right, but stay with me, though. Let me explore this, because there is something, I think, for people to say, what happened when you were on such a roll that you began to hit the rough patch?
Right.
What did it do to you, and what did it cause you to question, and how did you come out of it?
Well, first of all, I'm immune, because I've now got a young team.
I know.
They do all the work, and I'm very supportive, and I worry for them, but I don't really worry.
Well, Stanley Druckenmiller and people like that have gotten all the credit.
But they took all the pain, because, managing money the way we do is extremely painful. A very responsible job and very stressful. And I don't actually feel the stress. If I did, I probably wouldn't be able to sit here and talk to you. So that's number one.
You don't feel the stress anymore because it's not your judgments that are on the line?
I'm not on the line. Right. They are on the line, and I'm just stand behind them. I'm coach,
right?
And they are performing. It's
You're the
course,
coach and Stanley's a quarterback, is that?
Right. So of course I'm involved.
But in the Sterling coup, which would not coup, in the investment there, where you captured the attention of the world and certainly the Bank of England,
right?
Did you put $10 billion at risk or not?
Yes.
Now, was that all profit or was that principal?
Well, it was our principal, but it was not all at risk, because the most we could have lost would have been, let's say, 2-3%, because there was no. It was a high reward, low risk bet.
Right.
If it had gone wrong, we would have had the transaction cost of undoing it. Right. Whereas if we got it right, we made something like 15-20%. So we did put all our equity at risk, but it wasn't. It wasn't really very much of an
risking 10 billion. You were risking $1 billion or
less, even less.
Even less.
No, substantially less.
Yeah.
We made $1 billion, but we made more than $1 billion actually. But we could have lost a few $100 million, which would have been perfectly acceptable. This is an era of high capitalism, if you like, where the interests of the shareholders rule supreme, and managements pay a lot of attention to the interests of the shareholders.
You say this is a golden age of capitalism. Mm-hmm. It continues.
Yes.
What is it about where we are economically in the world, looking at it globally, that makes you optimistic about capitalism?
Well, don't
put words in your mouth.
No, please don't, because I'm not so optimistic. In fact, I'm pretty sure that this golden age is not going to last forever, because it's built on false foundations. We've had a similar period, let's say, at the end of the last century, and it didn't last. You had global markets. Money didn't move as fast as it's moving now, but it moved just as much. It was very similar to what we have today. In fact, it was more stable than what we have today because, first of all, you had the gold standard as opposed to the fluctuating currency system, which is much more unstable that we have now. And secondly, you had an imperial power, England, that was the main beneficiary of this global trading system, you know, the City of London.
Yes.
And they were perfectly willing to send a gunboat or two to faraway places in order to, you know, put down the native, keep the natives in place.
To maintain the empire.
That's right. We don't have that now because the United States is the sole remaining superpower, but is not the main beneficiary of this global trading system. And therefore, you know, we can't be the policeman of the world. We can't afford it. We don't want to be. And therefore, there is no policeman. And there is no imperial power. There is no balance of powers as you had during the Cold War, when you had these two superpowers sort of keeping each other in check. So you have a vacuum, a power vacuum. You have instability. And this is actually one of the main points I make in the book. This cannot last like this. We actually need an international security system. And the trouble is that the United Nations has failed just at a time when it would be most needed.
Bosnia being one perfect example.
Bosnia has been to the United Nations as Abyssinia was to the League of Nations in 1935. It showed that the League of Nations doesn't work.
Proved its impotency.
That's right. And this is an issue for us, particularly for the United States, because we created the United Nations. It's our design. We are the leading power, but we say the United Nations failed. They failed.
Yeah.
It's us that have decided not to.
In terms of Bosnia and what the Clinton administration has done, are you supportive because of your concern for what's happened to the children of Sarajevo?
Look, I think that we did finally. You see, when actually the survival of NATO became an issue, because NATO got involved and it lost its credibility. And for us, maintaining the credibility of NATO is what really moved us. And also to help Clinton in his re-election campaign.
To appear to be strong in foreign policy.
Yeah, because there was a great weakness there, so he had to do something. Well,
but let me come back to the United States and what we might do. The United States, you think, began to say we have to do something different in order to rescue NATO,
right,
which was clearly ineffectual and being called into question. And we're now talking about NATO expansion.
Yes.
What can be done now, in a sense, not with respect to Bosnia, but about the future of NATO? What has to happen? And has the United States, by these actions, in a sense, recreated
well, it has saved
a military arrangement that has no mission like it had in the Cold War?
You're putting your finger on it, because I think it has saved NATO, but the mission of NATO, what is it supposed to do, remains unclear. Is it directed at Russia? Then it means we want to turn Russia into an enemy.
Right.
So I think that the mission of NATO has to be redefined.
And what might it be?
I think that that they ought to stand to protect open societies, basically. You know, Russia in this geopolitical chess board, you know, that...
Was it difficult for you, because of your own experience in that area, to, over that period of years from the fall of communism and the fall of the wall and the decline of those regimes, to sit back and see opportunity and not watch, because I don't think the administrations, whether it was Bush or Clinton, seemed to know exactly what to do, and secondly, to know that they had the will of the people to do it in terms of investment?
Well, you see, I didn't sit. I actually threw everything I have into it, and I'm very satisfied having done it. I would have liked to influence policy, and I tried. I tried to get to Bush before he met Gorbachev in Malta, which I thought was the last time, really, to change the direction from the outside. Yeah. I was unable to do that. So I think that I've succeeded in everything, not everything, but in most of the things that I could do on my own. And I failed in influencing the policy.
But today, Strobe Talbot is the Deputy Secretary of State, is the principal architect of our policy towards Russia. Yes?
Yes.
He listens to you.
He does.
So you have influence on the part of the principal policymaker, not only towards Russia, but towards Eastern Europe.
Yes.
Right?
No, I do now have access. No question. We actually work together. The country where I'm most engaged and we are really working together is Ukraine.
Yes.
Because there was a chance to change the direction. The country was sinking, it was disintegrating, it was failing. And a new president was elected, and for the first time, the West, under American leadership, had the wisdom to say, we will invest $4 billion if there is a reform program. So that, and now Ukraine has changed. Now, it's early days, it's very tough. I'm very engaged on working on it, and we have good working relations with the American government, with the international institutions. And I'm hopeful. Finally, in this one case, we are doing the right thing as much as one can from the outside.
When asked, is your opinion also that we ought to push forward with NATO expansion regardless of what the Russian government says?
I think I think that the issue is the question is raised the wrong way. Let Europe admit Poland and Hungary to the European Union. Security will take care of itself. So this is now disturbing disintegration of the European Union. You see, Japan faces a problem of deflation,
right,
the likes of which we have not seen since the Depression. It's due to, prices are falling and economic activity is falling. It was a very disturbing development. The banking system is in deep trouble, a lot of bad loans. The government has taken steps to try to dig itself out of this hole. One of the ways of doing it is actually to try to get the yen down in value. This gives a little opportunity to people like me to make some money and dig ourselves out of the hole.
Yeah, I know. You lost some money on the yen, did you not?
That's right. So interest
some money
rates,
is putting it lightly, probably.
There are these holes in the banking system, so you can push a lot of string into those holes. So you will be able to do something. So I think that Japan will probably dig itself out, but it hasn't even started to deal with the structural issue which has gotten it into the hole. Because what people don't realize, we sort of so admire this fabulous industrial
economic
machine.
miracle that's taken place there.
The industrial machine, where Japan really has comparative advantage in practically every industry that it enters.
Because they were modernized after the war and they had appropriate management.
Yeah, I think it's a lot. It has a lot to do with mentality.
Right, that's what I want to say.
Really sort of a work ethic, and in a way, sort of a feudal mentality, which is good for producing, but not very good for trading, not very good for playing financial markets. For that, you need a different mentality, a commercial mentality, and that they don't have. And because of that, they have this financial machine, which is under the control of the Ministry of Finance. It's run by bureaucrats and operated by bureaucrats, and they have actually frittered away practically all the wealth.
Oh, the profits of the industrial miracle.
That's right. So there's this tremendous failure next to the tremendous success. We've been mesmerized by the success. We haven't paid attention to the failure.
How about China? What's your feeling about China and all the talk about the potential of China, both as a market because of 1 billion plus people?
Well, I have a little theory about China, and that is that the communist regime will be swept out of power by an old-fashioned capitalist bust.
What do you mean?
Well, because basically the regime has lost the mandate of heaven, so as they call it, namely the trust of the people, and is now tolerated because it delivers economic advance. Right. And it does it
because it's opened itself up to capitalist.
Yeah, it attracts foreign investment, right, which is the engine driving the. And if ever that engine goes into reverse, then you're going to have political trouble, which will push the foreign investors further into reverse, which will then create further political problems. So you could have a political and economic collapse together.
When you were 14 years old, your father taught you, you say, in a masterful way, the art of survival.
Yeah.
What did you mean?
Well, because, you know, this was the German occupation. We would have been taken away and killed. And he had enough sense, because of his previous experiences, to realize that the normal...
What do you mean his previous experiences?
Well, he was a prisoner of war in Russia,
right.
And he escaped, and he lived through the Russian Revolution, and he came back from that a changed man, because, you know, he saw this turmoil, you know, fighting, and I mean, he went through a horrendous experience, and that taught him a lesson which then came in very useful. He in turn taught me a lesson which came in useful to me.
Which is the art of survival, which is...
Well,
tell
it's
me more.
basically that there are times when the normal rules don't apply. You see, the way you've looked at the world is just not applicable because the world has changed. It's a revolutionary situation.
When has it been applicable in your life, and when has it been employed in your life?
Well, it was certainly had this experience with the Nazi regime, then the communist regime, the beginnings of the communist regime, and then actually I've kind of specialized on these far from equilibrium situations in the financial markets. That's been my specialty.
But explain more.
In other words, changes, you see, people generally play with a certain set of rules.
Right.
And I am particularly interested in changes in the rules of the game. And so I'm looking for the new game and the new rules, how they are played. So because I'm attuned to that, I can sort of sometimes anticipate or understand these periods of regime change when something really new is happening. Let's say anything to do with technology, let's say internet is something really revolutionary. It's something probably comparable to the invention of printing, and is happening currently. Now that changes a lot of things in technology stocks.
And was that the reason for the investors' enthusiasm for Netscape?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. No, that may be, of course, an exuberance, but still, that is far from equilibrium. That's a revolutionary change.
That is just the internet, in your judgment, the World Wide Web, is as important as the printing press.
Yes, I think it will change, you know, the way we do many things. Not just, I mean, the way we do research, the way we do our shopping, the way we communicate with people. You know, to a large extent, I think it will replace television because it will replace the newspapers, because we'll probably get the information sort of collated for us.
Yes.
You know? So I mean, it's too difficult to anticipate.
But do you have a clear vision?
No, I don't have a clear vision. I just have a vision that there's some.
You know that there's a moment of change.
I have a chaotic vision, not a clear vision.
How have you changed after all of this money and all of this attention? I mean, what has it caused you to do with the way you live your life and choices you make for yourself?
Well, I think it empowered me in many ways. I mean, it has given me freedom, and it has also given me an ability to have much greater impact than otherwise. For me, thinking and understanding is the most important thing. But for many years in my youth, you know, I was deeply involved in profound philosophical questions, and I went on over and over the same questions until I was really spinning my wheels. I wasn't getting anywhere. Then I entered the real world, and I've moved forward. You see, my wheels grabbed on, and that has enabled me to bring my own thinking forward. So let's say the conceptual framework which I outlined there, I formed it in my student days, but I've developed it a lot further. You see, so I think that I'm,
What did markets teach you about your philosophical framework?
Well, it was a laboratory where I could test my ideas. And
because it is a hard-headed, very realistic laboratory.
It's a hard taskmaster.
Yes,
you see. So there is such a thing as reality. Okay, there's one should realize, and funny thing to say that the market is reality, because it seems to be so far removed from reality. But that is actually a very good example of what reality is, because all the false ideas and misconceptions that we have, and which play in the market, is part of the reality that we have to think about. So the role of misconceptions is tremendously important in forming reality. You see, that
the reality of the market is infused by your recognition of all the misassumptions that go into it.
You see, one of the major misconceptions, which we sort of started with the Greek philosophers and then was reinforced by science, the success of science, is that our thinking is here and reality is there. And there's a correspondence between the two. We try to understand what's out there. But in effect, our thinking is part of the reality that we are trying to understand. You see, so instead of thinking of two parallel things, we have to realize that there is one big thing, which is reality. Okay, and there really is such a thing, and we are part of it. And being part of it, we can't possibly encompass it, understand it fully. And our conceptions about what that thing is, usually misconceptions, is part of it. So it's an evolving reality. It's a self-generating reality. The more we understand, the better we can cope with it, the more sophisticated our civilization becomes. The more complicated, the more there is to understand. And we now have a global market, and we don't have global institutions. And we still need regulation, and we really have to do something.
But I should point out that the Quantum Fund is an offshore fund.
Yeah, well, I know what I'm speaking about.
I should tell you.
I don't mind regulation as long as it doesn't single out our fund. As long as it applies to everyone equally.
It's okay to regulate, but don't regulate offshore funds.
No. It's all right to regulate offshore funds as long as they are not singled out. And particularly we are not singled out.
Okay. You are, what, 60-something, right? 65. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? What is it that you hope you can accomplish? Whether you live 30 years or 5.
Yeah, since I'm a believer in an open society, I think this is an open-ended question. You see,
you may change tomorrow.
No, what I mean is that I really don't know. I mean, I have a sense of direction, how far I can go. Maybe this is it. Maybe I've just peaked right this minute.
Yeah, well, but I mean, what's the opposite side of it? I mean, what is the open-ended is in terms of what you think? You don't know the answer in terms of how whatever influences you can bring to bear.
Yes, well, I really, you see, having engaged in a lot of action in the last 5 years, I'm now really entering a period of reflection. And I was focusing, let's say, on Eastern Europe. I now realize that there's something fundamentally flawed or missing in our open societies. There's
like what?
Well, there is a crisis of values and a lack of cohesion, a lack of a common purpose. And people are groping for it in different ways. And I see the need for it, but I don't know the answer. You see, I don't know. For instance, I see this tremendous need for a stable security system. I really think that we will have an awful lot of wars and
how about moral values?
And
how
and
about
that
the notion of a sense of purpose?
yes, that is very much part of
Questions of liberty and freedom.
yes, I mean the
and
question is, you see, you live in an open society. It means that we live in a global society, multicultural. What is it that we really believe in? We have our values. The Japanese have theirs. Singapore tells us that Asian values are different from American values. There has to be something, you see, that unites us, something that we stand for. And I have this rather difficult notion that what unites us is that there is the recognition that our understanding of the world in which we live is imperfect. And we have to have respect for each other's opinions. That there is a reality, but there is a pluralism of values. And that pluralism is a good thing. Now, therefore, pluralism has to be the common value.
Right.
Now, how to get there? You see, we have it enshrined in our constitution, freedom and so on. But it doesn't apply on a global scale. It only applies to our country. And it's said these things we hold self-evident. Well, it isn't self-evident. We somehow have to come to this conclusion. You see that freedom is worth preserving. That it needs to be preserved, that it won't survive without our willingness to fight for it, to make some sacrifices for it. So there has to be, let's say, a common ground for which we are willing to stand.
To stand for. I'm pleased to have him back on this program. Welcome back.
It's nice to be
Great
back.
to see you. Tell me, when the president asked for support on the basis of this agreement and to send 20,000 American military forces there, are you enthusiastically behind that call?
Very much so. I think that we have a grave responsibility for what happened there. I've been very critical of the administration's policies there. And now that we have a chance to build peace or to maintain peace, we must make that move because we are involved. We are part of the embargo on armaments. So we are one way or another party to this horrible slaughter. And so now here's our chance to do something to maintain peace, and we mustn't fail.
Do you think the American public has the will to withstand, for the lack of a better expression, body bags coming home?
I very much hope so. So it is unfortunately caught up in the domestic policy. Of course, the budget debate also exacerbates the sentiment. But nevertheless, I hope, really sincerely hope, that Congress will support it, because it's very important.
What do you worry about, though? I mean, there are a lot of people say, I don't know, and the president has not convinced me he has an exit strategy. All he has is a date.
Right.
That's not a strategy.
Well, the date is very important because that's the presidential election date, more or less. So I think that's the greatest assurance that he'll do everything to make sure that the troops are home before the elections. I think that's the exit strategy. What can those troops do? Basically, they can only keep the factions apart. They can't bring them together. It's not their mission. And it's very clear that they are not supposed to do that.
This is not nation building.
This is not nation building. Look, they are exhausted. There are 600,000 Serbs left in the Serbian part of Bosnia. There used to be 1.5 million Serbs in Bosnia. The 600,000 in the Serb part, 150,000 in the Bosnian part, and 750,000 have left. Now, if some of those people come back, the mixture changes. The main city, Banja Luka, is actually the one city in Bosnia which is not destroyed. It's actually untouched,
right,
except for some mosques, 16 mosques that have been blown up. And actually there, the Muslims were protected by the local population. They were only expelled in the very end. And even today, there are about 6,000 Bosnians living in Banja Luka. So I think that it will not be impossible to rebuild a multi-ethnic society. It's going to be difficult, but not impossible. And when you, particularly, I put very much emphasis on the role of the War Crimes Tribunal. I think it's very, very important.
So what would you do then if you were Milosevic?
I'm actually amazed that he's accepted all these terms. Law is built by precedent, and this is going to be a very important precedent. So I think one should not underestimate. People think, well, that's just a lot of words. I think this time it's really going to happen. I'll certainly do whatever I can to make sure that it does.
Well, what does that mean?
Well, I think we all have to apply pressure. I think that the mechanism is there to make it work. It's really a question of the will of the international community.
It amazes me how much has been now placed on this accord. The savior of NATO, the savior of America's reputation in the world.
Yes.
And you go down the list of one item after another. We've invested an enormous amount.
Yes.
And somehow coming to some kind of acceptable end to this conflict.
Right.
Because the heinous nature of the atrocities committed has been so...
Yeah, unfortunately, we have not been moved by the heinous nature of those.
Right.
We were moved by, and this is where our national interest has been brought into question, NATO. The credibility of NATO was at stake. So it was NATO, and the credibility of our president was also at stake. So those two things are finally the elements that have moved us to change our attack.
Last time you were here, you said to me that you had supported President Clinton in 1992. You were unlikely to support him in 96 and will probably support Dole, if I heard you.
Well, I have just written him a letter to say that in view of the latest developments, I will support him in 96.
So you're back supporting Clinton in 96?
Yes, based on but the fact that finally we begin to have some kind of a foreign policy. I was very critical of Clinton for not having a coherent policy.
But what about Dole, who all along has advocated, lift the embargo and strike all along? So
yeah, well, you see, I think that Dole is also acting responsibly, having endorsed But he played a very strange game, actually, because he was for lifting the embargo, but he was very much against the use of troops.
Yes.
And it was a kind of a somewhat ambivalent
I agree with you, but at the same time, what's interesting is the use of troops sort of got accepted in the beginning because we talked about using them to pull out. The president's word will use American troops to pull out, to help the NATO troops withdraw, perhaps to make available the opportunity to use airstrikes. But that whole notion became moved over and sat in, and those same troops and the idea of using American troops all of a sudden was to play a different role, which was not to help somebody evacuate, but to be in a peacekeeping function.
Right. Well, you see, that was the original offer, actually.
Right.
It was originally a peacekeeping offer. Then it changed to a NATO withdrawal offer.
Mission,
and then when the UN troops were mistreated, and President Chirac took a firm stand, that's when we changed our attack. Milosevic has really changed the attack. He was the one who really started it all. He unleashed this ethnic thing.
In the interest of a greater Serbia.
Right, and now he is the great leader for peace. Whether he can get away with it is another story.
All right, great to see you, George.
Okay. There's a considerable problem in Russia, Ukraine is on the ropes. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now that are very worrisome.
Do you see in and among your capitalist colleagues the wisdom required to accept that kind of modification of capitalism that you suggest?
I think we all have to put our heads together because I don't exactly know what kind of modification I'm suggesting.
What do you mean?
In the sense that I can see that the system is defective. I can see the problems, but I don't have solutions. I don't know exactly what to do about it.
But your basic solution, isn't it, is attitudinal?
Yes.
And it has to do with modifying the dog-eat-dog Darwinian approach that we're taking now?
That is right. But then once we've changed the attitude, we then have to put our heads together and see what kind of institutional changes do we need. We probably need to strengthen some of the international institutions. We may have to create new ones. We have to make them work better. You have got the United Nations that has a function and is not fulfilling that function very well. So there's a lot of... First, I would like to advocate a change in attitudes. But once you have changed your attitude, you then have to use it for developing new solutions, new institutions.
Well, before we even get to that, seriously, what chance do you see that there is going to be an attitudinal change, particularly given the response to your piece in the Atlantic?
Well, I think one has to work at it. It's
You're hedging. You're a great hedger.
No, that's true. I really don't know. All I can say is that we need to change our attitude. Whether we'll have the wisdom to do it, I don't know.
What's the alternative?
Well, we go on as we are. I think this global capitalist system is very powerful. It really is a thing that hangs together very well. It's very painful to quit for any country to renege on its obligations. The consequences are quite disastrous. But if the conditions deteriorate and being in the system becomes too painful, then you will have eventually some countries that will react negatively. So I think we are facing now a period of considerable political turmoil, I would say particularly in Asia, in the countries which have been hit by the financial crisis. Very interesting what's going to happen in China, which is at the moment has not yet been affected by it, but indirectly it will be affected, and it will have to respond. So I think there could be quite some changes in China also. So I think that the situation is very complicated, and I think you will have important political developments in the next couple of years.
And in this country?
I think it may. We are actually in a way the beneficiaries of what's happening in the world.
How so?
Because the global capitalist system has a center, and we are in effect the center. You see, it's the dollar that is the dominant currency in the world. Of course, Europe is in similar position. They are also sort of the dollar and the Deutschmark, the new currency, the European currency. These are the strong currencies. So being at the center, you actually benefit from goods that are going to be supplied at lower prices. So inflation, which has been a threat, is no longer a threat. It's the other way. Prices are very stable, and they even may decline in certain areas. Particularly import prices are likely to come down. So which means that without inflation, we don't need high interest rates to fight inflation. So we can lower interest rates. The lower interest rates stimulate the economy. So actually being at the center, the fact that you have got a storm in the periphery is to our benefit.
But if it is to our benefit economically, as you suggest, in those terms, do you anticipate that the benefits will include a diminution of the dichotomization in this country between rich and poor? Do you anticipate that lower interest rates will bring about a better sharing, a more equitable sharing?
No, I don't. No, I don't think so. Because actually, in some ways, they will even increase the tension between the lower paid, let's say whose job are more easily substituted by imports from abroad, and the more skilled, let's say, the service industries, which are not subject to competition from abroad, will be much better situated than the people working in areas which has import competition.
Well,
so it will be, I think the tensions, if anything, the social tensions might actually increase because of that.
Well, that's the point that puzzles me in terms of the reactions to what you have written, have said, and in Soros on Soros, the same messages are there. It puzzles me. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago in the New York Times Magazine section, I think it was there, Lester Thoreau wrote a piece raising a question: how long can a democracy sustain itself if there is a continuing division, a widening division between the haves and the have-nots? And I guess you're suggesting that that division is going to get greater.
Somewhat greater. You see, there is a tension here, and it's something to be concerned about. But I'm much more concerned with the international setting. You see, this is where our perspectives are different. Because if there is tension between the haves and have-nots here, then you look at it as a global system, and there's tension between the haves and the have-nots, and that tension is going to increase greatly. And I'm really much more concerned about the international implications than the domestic ones. We are, in some ways, in a privileged position. There's plenty to be concerned about. I'm not minimizing it. But what I'm saying is that the international problem, the international tensions are much greater, and they are being intensified even while we speak.
Well, but of course, one could never deny what you're saying, but the tensions in our own country will must lead inevitably to the kinds of pressures toward protectionism that you fear will push the world over into a free fall.
Right. And if we turn protectionist, then there's a danger of replaying what happened in the interwar period. So that is the case. So I am concerned about inequities in this country also.
You know, the question comes up, it's, I forget whether I learned it in Cicero or where, the question of how long will you abuse our patience? How long do you think we can abuse the patience of those who are have-nots, and increasingly are have-nots in our own country? You think there's a point at which those who are deprived, seeing how much the rest of us have, will say no further?
Look, any kind of revolution, I think, can be pretty well ruled out in this country. I think this country is basically a healthy country. I have an international perspective. I see how rotten situations are in other countries. So I'm a great admirer of this country. So I don't think that we are ripe for a revolution. Correction has to be a political process. And unfortunately, money plays too big a role in politics. That has to be corrected. The people have votes, and there is a democracy. So if people are fed up with the way things are now, they can express it in the political process. So I'm more concerned about the political process functioning properly. I'm concerned about the role of money in politics, which is excessive. And I'm concerned about the attitude of the elite, who are too much taken up by this laissez-faire ideology that you leave it to the markets and everything will take care of itself. So I think there has to be a change of heart among the leadership.
What in the world would bring about that change of heart?
Oh, I think that some of the things that have been enacted in the last few years have had an adverse consequence that people are aware of. Take, for instance, the legislation on immigration, which was very repressive, very unjust, because it disqualified effectively taxpayers from receiving the benefits to which they were entitled. This is legal immigrants were denied those rights. I think that in fact, legislators, Republicans, realized that they've made a big mistake, that it needs to be corrected. And in fact, they've gone quite a long way towards correcting it. They haven't entirely reversed it, but a large part of the injustice has been corrected. So that shows that the process, the political process, actually works.
Yes, but I'm talking about the thing you're most concerned with, and that is attitudes toward the role of the marketplace. We are a market-driven society. Every place you turn, you hear, well, the market provides.
So
a mantra.
Well, I'll give you another example. I'm concerned about the role of the professions, the loss of professional values, and the fact that they are being superseded by
the dollar mark.
Dollar mark, right? Take the medical profession, which has been very much mesmerized by the dollar sign. I see a change of attitudes, partly because of the new system of HMOs, which hurt the doctors as well as the patients. And I think the possibility of, let's say, new coalitions between patients and doctors to change the system, because I think the doctors are not too happy with the way the system is developing. And this is a purely market system where, providing healthcare becomes strictly a business. And so there is, I think, among the professionals, an increasing resistance to it.
So a non-revolutionary revolution of a sort.
Right. You see, while I am almost a specialist in revolutions.
Well, George Soros, traitor to your class or not, thank you very much for joining me today on The Open Mind.
We may now think that everything is fine, but the fact is that the system is broke and it needs fixing.
What you're doing is asking some form of regulation to protect the world against you.
Well, I am a player, and I think all players should be regulated. There have to be rules of the game.
In the last 2 years, you've been blamed for financial collapse of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, and Russia.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Are you that powerful?
No, I think there's a great misunderstanding.
The Prime Minister of Malaysia said that the region spent 40 years trying to build up its economy, and along comes a moron like Soros with a lot of money, and it's all over. He called you a criminal.
It's easier for him to blame an outside force than to admit that they were mismanaging their economy and their currency. The French finance minister talked about hanging speculators from lampposts. I think that I've been blamed for everything. I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do.
At the center of George Soros, there's an inherent contradiction.
Which is?
Which is, on one hand, you're the capitalist who does not care about the social consequences of his act, and on the other hand, you are a philanthropist who cares only about social consequences. How do you resolve the two?
Recognizing that as a competitor, I've got to compete to win. As a human being, I am concerned about the society in which I live.
Which George Soros am I talking to now? The amoral George Soros or the moral George Soros?
It's one person. It's one person who at one time engages in amoral activities and at the rest of the time tries to be moral.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
Are you religious?
No.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Soros told us he believes God was created by man, not the other way around, which may be why he thinks he can smooth out the world's imperfections. When we went with him to Ukraine, he was treated like a visiting head of state and was received by the president. Then he was received by the prime minister and finally the central bank.
20% in cash.
They even allowed him to look at the books and asked him for advice. Lots of people want George Soros' advice. Most recently, South African President Nelson Mandela.
Actually, President Mandela asked me, how could South Africa protect itself against speculators like you? And I told him, I wrote him a memo, trying to give him the best advice I could, how to reduce the exposure of South Africa to speculative attack.
That's the old stop me before I kill again approach, right?
Well,
you're telling this is what you can do to stop me.
Whether I or somebody else does whatever is happening in the markets, it really doesn't make any difference to the outcome. I don't feel guilty because I'm engaged in an amoral activity which is not meant to have anything to do with guilt.
Why is it that Americans can't invest in the quantum fund? It's an offshore fund. Why is that?
Because the fund is not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We are not
licensed to do business in the United States.
That's right.
Because?
Because we are not registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Because we find it more convenient to operate without it.
So in some ways it's to escape regulation.
Yeah, that's right.
But you've been sitting here talking about the need for regulation.
Yes, and whatever regulations are imposed, we will obey. We already conform to everything.
One of your money manager told us that George really does think he's a god.
I mean, if you think that you're God and you go into financial markets, you're bound to come out broke. So the fact that I'm not broke shows that I don't believe that I'm God.
George Soros is a legend in the world of investment management. When he moves money, the markets react. When he speaks, the world listens. He's also made an impact through a network of foundations dedicated to global economic and political improvements. He is the chairman of Soros Fund Management.
It's nice to be here.
Tell me about how, I mean, the origin of the book, because you have before laid out for me and others your own philosophical base in an open society.
Right.
Start with me by talking about the Open Society, in a sense, as a foundation, and where you have gone in your concerns about the economic crisis we face as we speak.
Well, I started out with a framework that I really developed as a student when I was influenced by Karl Popper, right. Open Society and Its Enemies. The totalitarian systems that impose themselves on the people by force in order to get their ideology accepted. And he counterposed to that the concept of an open society where it is recognized that nobody has a monopoly of the truth, that all views are, that we may be wrong, and therefore we need a government that we are ready to replace, a democratic government, a market economy, critical thinking. As the communist regime started to collapse, I got sucked into a revolutionary transition, and I ended up setting up foundations in some 30 countries. And they did a lot of good, I think, just by empowering people who had a concept of an open society to move towards it. I mean, I don't have a definition of what an open society is. An open society has to define itself. So I let the people in the countries define themselves. And then this framework didn't really work quite as I expected, because the collapse of a closed society did not lead to the creation of an open society. There was something missing. And I began to realize that open society is threatened not only by a totalitarian regime, but also by an excessive reliance on market values, that there has to be something else to hold a society together. Open society is sort of a middle ground, which is neither this what I call market fundamentalism, nor let's say communism or socialism or nationalism. It's the recognition that all our systems are flawed, all our concepts are flawed, and we must remain open to improvement. Particularly financial markets are unstable. But
that's the central core of what you fear about markets, is the instability of the financial market.
Right. Well, that is something that I know about, and I'm on pretty firm ground.
Right.
So there I have, I think, a pretty strong...
And used to your advantage.
Yes. I mean, that's my profession.
Exactly.
Well,
you once said you'd rather be known as someone who's contributed something to philosophy than someone who had contributed nothing but the making of a lot of money.
Right.
And building up your own economic resources.
Yes, yes. We do have monetary authorities that try to preserve stability, and we have central banks in each country and so on. We also have the International Monetary Fund, and the regulatory system that applies actually exacerbated the problem.
The regulatory system?
The intervention by the International Monetary Fund and the monetary authorities.
What does this crisis say to you needs to be done? What does the threat that you saw from capitalism cause to be done? In other words, said better, what should we do and what's your solution?
We need to recognize how the system works and reshape the mechanism for controlling the excesses. I think that the mission of the International Monetary Fund has to be reconsidered. We need something like a new Bretton Woods for a world which is characterized by the free flow of capital, because the Bretton Woods was designed for a very different world. If there is a bust, you then demand or allow the countries concerned to impose conditions on the lenders, as well as having to undergo some severe restrictions themselves. So you spread the burden of the adjustment between lenders and borrowers. This is incidentally what really should have been done in this crisis, because some countries have overborrowed. They had too much debt and not enough equity. For instance, Korea or Thailand. Now, actually, lending them more money can't get you out of the trouble. You need to change the relationship of equity and debt. So you really would have had to have some kind of a moratorium and some debt equity reorganization. It is happening now. Let's say Korea has just moved in that direction, but it's 1 year after the crisis, and so in the meantime, the economy has plunged into severe recession. I think an earlier move would have abated this problem.
World Bank has been critical of the IMF. You share that criticism?
Yes, I think, but I also have first of all, a lot of respect for the IMF and a lot of understanding for their position, because their mission is, their first task is to preserve the financial system. So they want to make sure that the debtor countries can meet their obligations. Sure. Because if they defaulted, as in the end Russia did, it can disrupt the whole system. So since that is their concern, they want to stabilize the currency, because if the currency falls too much, then the debt denominated in dollars becomes overwhelming. And they want to actually have the country go into a recession so that it has a trade surplus, which allows it to pay the debt. So they are confined by their mission. They do the right thing. But the effect is they raise interest rates to a punitive level, which then has a very negative effect on the economy. Whereas what, for instance, the Federal Reserve has done when the crisis looked like it was beginning to impinge on our markets,
lowered interest rates.
Immediately lowered interest rates, and lo and behold, we seem to be breathing easier.
Do you believe that today, as we speak, before Christmas 1998, that the crisis is under control and the worst is behind us?
I think that the panic phase is behind us. In other words, this wrecking ball that traveled around the world.
The notion that it would somehow overwhelm us like a tidal wave.
Right.
That has been calmed.
That, I think, has definitely been calmed. What we are now suffering from is the after effects, the effect of the financial markets on the real economies. So you have a third of the world in severe recession. You'll probably have some more because Brazil has yet to enter into a recession.
But is certain to?
Brazil.
But is likely to.
It's destined to, because the program calls for it.
Right. What do you mean the program calls for it?
The IMF program calls for it. I mean, even the government because this is actually a program designed by the government, the Brazilian government.
Final question, have you yet done what you most want to be remembered for? Apart from family, have you done with your personal life, have you achieved yet what you most want to be remembered for?
I think so, and I think the book has a lot to do with it, because I actually want. This is the book I always wanted to write, and have it actually read. So I think I got there. Now it's not the end of the road, because, as I said, I think I'm better on the analysis than I am on the solution. So I think I'll have to keep on working on trying to refine the solution.
The Crisis of Global Capitalism, George Soros. It's a pleasure to have you, as always. Thank you, George.
Thank you. You've got to suspend your critical faculties and be patriotic. And that, I think, is a threat to an open society, because an open society depends very, very fundamentally on open discussion and a critical attitude.
What was in your mind? What did you expect to find? What did you want to find? And have you found it?
Here. Well, I chose the West because I sought for freedom. But to be frank, I came to America to make money.
There is quite a contradiction between making money and philanthropy and political involvement such as you engage in. How do you see these two things as reconciling in your mind?
Well, first of all, in order to give money away, you've got to make it first, unless you inherit it. The two things, making money and giving money away, are all inspired by the same sort of set of ideas.
Well, that's interesting. Let me ask you to elaborate a little on that. I mean, I would imagine. Well, let me ask you, do you enjoy the making of the money as much as you do the activities that it enables you to engage in once it's there?
Well, I used to enjoy making money a lot. And it's a very exciting activity, it's very challenging. But it didn't give me the kind of satisfaction that I have in giving it away. I mean, I had one particular experience that I sort of referred to when I was under tremendous strain, and I thought that I was going to have a heart attack. And I thought, what a shame to die, making money. And
well, we're glad you did make it.
Now, in the things that I am engaged in, I'm actually willing to put my life at risk, and I think it makes me feel much more complete.
You, in a way, by entering the world of electoral politics, are an oligarch.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, an oligarch on the Democratic rather than the Republican side. What's the rebuttal to that suggestion?
Well, first of all, I like the philanthropolitic. That's a very good term. There's been a lot of discussion of my sort of political donations, and the fact that I'd been supporting and continue to support campaign finance reform. Now, I think that my activities are fully in compliance, not only with the letter of the law, but also with the spirit. And NPR, for instance, one of the few institutions left in our media that is really giving good information.
And would you, are you inclined to support something like NPR? I mean, do you think it plays that critical role?
Well, I'm not financially supporting NPR, but I support it in principle.
Yes, principle and interest. Global markets, such as they are paramount. Do you think this system has enough integrity to survive, given the weaknesses of sovereign structure and nation states?
No, you have currently some kind of a distortion in globalization, because you've got global markets, but political arrangements remain firmly based on the principle of sovereignty. And because of the greatly increased interdependence, what goes on inside other countries is of vital interest to us and to everybody in the world. So what kind of regime you have in Afghanistan, let's say, has a bearing on our security. And that poses an unsolved problem. What do you do about internal political developments in countries? Because most of the poverty and misery in the world today is due to bad government of one sort or another. Repressive regimes, corrupt regimes, failed states, and so on. What do you do about that? And that is the great unsolved problem that we need to address.
Well, talk about that. I mean, what is the right balance between sovereignty on the one hand and internationalism and maybe world government on the other hand, which, as you well know, is a real antichrist for many people in this country and elsewhere in the world?
Well, I think the principle of sovereignty is the prevailing principle, but it is becoming modified because there are some universal principles that begin to limit the concept of absolute sovereignty. So I think if you look at the sovereignty is sort of an anachronistic or a slightly atavistic idea goes back to where you had kings and subjects, and the kings ruled over their subjects. And then, in the French Revolution, the king was killed, and the people took possession of sovereignty. And that's modernity. That gave rise to the nation state. But the elected or non-elected governments very often abuse the sovereignty that belong to the people. And in that case, there is a need for the international community to intervene. And that concept needs to be elaborated. It is slowly being developed. There was a report which argued that there is a responsibility to protect, that when the people are abused by their own rulers and human rights are abused, that there is an international responsibility to intervene. That there was a declaration in Warsaw, the year 2000, which established the principle that it is in the interest of all democracies to help the development of democracy in other countries. But this is a principle that is an empty statement, like so many principles. But to breathe life into it, I think, is what is now needed. So I think this is the direction that we ought to move, and I think the United States ought to lead that movement. I very much hope that we are a democracy, and we can judge our leadership in the elections. It's like Orwell's Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Mm-hmm. That is, I think, where we have gone wrong. And if we now reject that, then I think we can undo, we can treat the events of the last few years as an aberration, and we can resume our place in the world. So we have a real choice, and it is clear to me what the choice should be, and I think it's tremendously important, and that's why I have made this sort of my project for this year, to try to. And now you have this belief in American supremacy. And that, I think, is this is sort of the neoconservative, the project for a new American century that was formed in 1997, and then advocated invading Iraq in 98. That, I think, is a dangerous new addition. If you advocate competition in the military field, that, I think, is very dangerous for world peace. Not everybody in the government is of this ilk. And you certainly, in the State Department, you basically have continuity and a much less ideological view of the world. It's around the Defense Department that this particular school of thought is concentrated, and that's where I think the real danger comes from. It's only that there is a sort of a group within the government that gained the upper hand after September 11. And because the critical process was suspended, they could get their way. And this is what led to the invasion of Iraq the way it happened. We are an occupying power in Iraq. And no government that we install would be a legitimate government. And now, with the elections looming and the need to get Iraq off the front burner, the Bush administration actually is correcting its mistakes and is turning to the United Nations. And I think it could actually, it will be a very painful process because of the tremendous ethnic tensions.
The world can ill afford to have American presidents have such a steep and repetitive learning curve. When Robert McNamara was here, I asked him at dinner, quite frankly, I asked him if he thought he would be a better leader now than when he was Secretary of Defense, and he said, by all means.
Yes.
And then I said, do you think we can afford to give people like you the opportunity to learn the lesson of a failed war in order to revise your view of the world? And he thought for a while, and he just shook his head, and he didn't answer. But this seems to me is the challenge.
Well, you can't avoid it. This is one of the, let's say, the penalties of democracy and changes in government. I remember very well when Kennedy became president and met with Khrushchev in Vienna, and Khrushchev sized him up and said, this is a naive guy and I can do what I want, and then imposed the division of Berlin, and we had the Berlin crisis. So Kennedy also had to learn the hard way. I think this is part of the
perfectibility of man.
Well, and then if you were to remain, let's say, in England, where you have a different system, and Margaret Thatcher remained Prime Minister for 10 years, she got carried away by her success and eventually overstepped the mark also. So, I mean, there is no perfect government. So we are always bound to make mistakes.
So at heart, you are fairly still a true believer in the democratic process, given some ups and downs, that it ultimately can clarify itself.
Well, it's as Churchill said.
Yes.
But
tell everybody what Churchill said.
No, well, you know that it's the worst political system except all the others. No, but in the end, an open society depends on a well-informed electorate that is, let's say, exercises reasonable judgment. And in that respect, our open society is now endangered in ways that it wasn't before. Because there is, and this is appropriate to a school of journalism, that there is a kind of an Orwellian truth machine operating in this country. And it's a very strange phenomenon because, of course, it's not new that information and facts should be twisted. They always are in the political process. And Orwell saw the danger of propaganda 50 years ago. But when he was talking, when he wrote 1984, he was referring to a ministry of truth in a country, or in an imaginary country, where the ministry controlled all the media. Here we do have free media, and nevertheless, there is a way to twist facts and move opinion.
I know that I don't know all the answers. Whatever frame I create is bound to be biased or incomplete or distorted. The important thing is to be aware and to try to minimize the damage.